The gospel reading is Luke chapter 6, beginning with the 17th verse. And Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him. And all the crowd sought to touch him, for power came forth from him and healed them all. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, "Blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you that hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you that weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you and when they exclude you and they revile you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for so their fathers did to the prophets. But woe to you that are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you that are full now, for you shall hunger. Woe to you that you laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
It's not hard to understand, is it, why Matthew's version of the Beatitudes is far more popular than Luke's. Matthew's gets cross-stitched and appears on posters, because in Matthew, Jesus, he blesses and he just blesses. But then in Luke, Jesus does some blessing, and then he's got to turn around and he's got some woes. Well, like he should have just left those off. We'd love Jesus more if he just left off the woes, right? The people came to be healed, Luke tells us, and Jesus responds with woes. You know, the word woe, always interesting tone of voice that you hear when you read the Bible, probably says more about our tangled understanding of God than about the truth of things. I always try to rethink tone of voice. You think, whoa, I mean, Jesus, I don't know, he sounds angry. He's wagging a finger like, woe to you. It's like somebody's really angry and they got the power to back it up, and you shrink back, you tremble, whoa. But was that really Jesus' tone of voice? The Greek word that's translated woe, similar to the Hebrew word that's translated woe, it's not a harsh word, it's not an angry word, it's a word that you use when you're in grief. It's a word that you use when you are in sorrow. It's the word that you use when you're in a mood of lamentation. When Jesus says, woe, it's not woe, but it's whoa. It reminds me of, not a good example, but I've had back trouble like all my adult life, and years ago, I like that, back. I'm watching her, she's back. It's good. Back. Back. I've had back trouble all my life. When I was young, I went to a doctor, and he was very clinical and did, whatever. Years later, I went to another doctor, and he looked at all the scans of my back, and he came in, he was almost teary. He looked at me and he said, "I bet that really hurts." I couldn't help it. I just hugged the man. I didn't know him before that, but I loved him. I bet that really hurts, right? It's the beginning of healing. Jesus, he's talking about things that we value highly, like being well thought of, being full, being rich, laughing. And Jesus says, I bet in some way that can really hurt. How can that be? Jesus says, woe when people speak well of you. You know, Aristotle said that the opposite of a friend is a flatterer. I always love it when people flatter us and flatter our ego, but Aristotle said the opposite of that is a friend. A friend is the person who can actually speak truth, who isn't just, pumping you up for and you say, woe to you when people speak well of you. It's so easy to become dependent upon the praise of others. How many likes do I get? Like we level that in our society. Jesus sees the peril in that. Jesus is concerned when you laugh a lot. I know people like that. They're just a laugh a minute. They're the life of the party. They just laugh. It's just, fun. They're great. You love to be around people that laugh. I think Jesus always worries that there's something underneath, that's a mask. I've been studying this artist lately. A friend of mine wrote a book about him, Rouault. And Rouault did a lot of paintings of people wearing a mask, like there's sadness underneath, but the mask is, fun, happiness. Jesus is concerned about that kind of thing. Jesus is concerned about, you're full. That sounds like a great thing, I'm full, but Jesus thinks, he worries when you get full, like you can get drowsy. When you get full, you don't realize what you don't have. You don't realize that you filled yourself maybe with all of the wrong stuff. Maybe it's like sports teams after they've won several championships. They just don't do as well because they're just not hungry anymore. We've already won. Frederick Buechner told you before. So we live our lives like a clenched fist. The clenched fist can hang on to things, it can work, but what the clenched fist can't do is become empty and accept a helping hand. It's the challenge of the haves. Jesus blesses those who are hungry, and he's concerned about those who are full. Jesus wants to know what we don't know. Jesus wants us to feel what we don't have yet. I love the poet Mary Oliver. She writes, "Another morning, and I wake with a thirst for the goodness I do not yet have." I want to say that every morning of my life. Another morning, and I wake with a thirst for the goodness I do not yet have. It's the way to healing. And then there's this. I just started Niall Williams' great novel called The History of the Rain. That sounds fitting for today. Right. On the opening page of the book, there's a daughter, and she's talking about her father. She says, "My father bore the burden of an impossible ambition. He wanted the world to be better than it was, beginning with himself and ending with the world." Right. I wonder if that's the thing that we all have in common across our political divide, is that at some point we all want the world to be better. We might have different ideas of what that looks like, but we all really want the world to be better. We want ourselves to be better. Jesus says, "Blessed are you who are hungry. Woe to you who are full. You've got it all figured out." We want the world to be better. Jesus tells us something about the shape of that better world. Jesus, we have to remember, just blessed the poor. He didn't blame them. He didn't pity them. Jesus blesses the poor. Jesus blesses the hungry. Jesus blesses those that people don't like. Jesus blesses the sorrowful. It's a clue to how to think and feel about stuff that we see going on in the world. Here's the thing. I want to end by thinking about sorrow. I just finished, I'm in love with Niall Williams, the novelist right now. I just finished his book called The Time of the Child, beautiful book. And then toward the end, he comes to a home, it's in Ireland, so it's a doctor that makes house calls. He comes to a home of a woman who's been dying, and she in fact has died. And he greets the husband at the door. I love what he says. He says, "The old man's eyes were beautiful in their grief." You ever seen eyes that are beautiful in their grief? He explains it. "In their tenderness of after tears, we see the testimony of true love." I have seen a lot of beautiful tears lately. We've lost a lot of precious people in our church lately, and in my personal circle, I've lost people that were very dear to me lately. Their tears. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who weep, for they will laugh." Trying to ponder that, somebody asked me, Jesus pulls back the curtain on what the future is like. Somebody asked me the other day, what's the name of that pub in Oxford where C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and Charles Williams and their other friends used to gather? It's called the Eagle and the Child. Sometimes they would call it the bird and the baby. The Eagle and the Child. I've been to that pub. It's a great place. Lewis and Tolkien, they'd come there. They were hungry. They would come there to eat. They would come there to drink beer, and they would read what they'd been working on. I love that idea of like Tolkien reading from The Lord of the Rings. Like before it was published, the first people who ever heard it were his friends there in that pub. They would read to one another, so beautiful as they would eat and as they would drink. Lewis reading his work. They loved this time together. Lewis once said, if you want a glimpse of what heaven is like, he said, let's take as an example the sound of grown men laughing. The sound of grown men laughing. I love that. Lewis and his friends would laugh, and he said, that's a glimpse of heaven. Jesus said, blessed are you who sorrow, for you will laugh. One of the books that I hope Lewis read to his friends, the Inklings, in that Eagle and the Child pub, it's the last of his books in the Narnia series. It's called The Last Battle. And spoiler alert, at the very end of the story, the Aslan, the lion, the Christ figure, is explaining things to the Pevensey children. The Pevensey children wake up and they rub their eyes and they can't figure out where they are. Well, it turns out they've died with their family. Here's what Aslan says to the children. There was a railway accident. Your father and mother and all of you are, as you used to call it, dead. The term is over. The holidays have begun. The dream is ended. This is the morning. And then the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot even write them. For us, this is the end of all the stories, and we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. My friends, Jesus blesses the poor. They will not always be poor. Jesus says, woe to you who are rich. Please don't get confused and think you've already received your consolation. It's just a pittance of what is to come. Jesus says, blessed are you who are hungry. And if you are full, rethink all that. You're really hungry for what only God can offer. Jesus says, blessed are you who weep. Woe to you who laugh. It's fine to laugh now, but in heaven, in eternity, there will be endless laughter, the sound of men, women, children, all laughing together. Lewis and his friends came to that pub. They were hungry. They were thirsty in their stomachs, but also for company. And I think even for God. That's why we do this today, to remind us of our real, deep hunger and God's great will to give us satisfaction, to bring us to laughter and joy. And for this we give thanks to God.